Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 5 of the shutdown here at Vineyard Christian Fellowship, Livermore. I want to remind us of something that we did last week. Jim has been bringing in a time of prayer after the worship time. This kind of started right before we went into lockdown mode, and we've been continuing it. And this past week, he kind of opened it up for us all to begin to think of words to speak to one another, words of blessing and encouragement, maybe something from the Lord. And we had a few here and got some really good feedback from the people who were at home watching it. And I just want to remind everybody that as Jim goes into that time today, that this is a time, even though we're not all here, that this is kind of an opening for us all to engage with that, no matter what time it is, or if it's before or after everybody else is watching it. And you also ask the Lord, who here should I speak, or could I speak a word to? And then, obviously you're not on the camera, but you've got a phone, so text that person, put it on the Facebook page, let that person know what God gave you for them, because it's a real blessing. So anyways, remember that when it comes time, and just go ahead and join in. I think we'll probably be seeing more of that as we move forward. So with that, we will get ready for worship. So grab your coffee, your donut, and fist bump your socially distant neighbor, and here we go.
Dwell in the midst Jesus, your unfailing love. The love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. Links love with our condition that we see in part, we prophesy in part, but then when that is perfect comes, this lack of fullness, this lack of full understanding will fall away. Some of us are faced with decisions in an environment where we just don't know. Listen to the words in that last song and let them wash over you. Because Jesus' love for you is perfect. And in that love, that which is incomplete will fall away. Leslie Shebler. And Lee. The responsibilities that God has called you to and that have been fashioned into your life His unfailing love for you is enough to carry you through not knowing, but having to make decisions anyway. You see in part, you prophesy in part, but for what you're facing and what you've been called to, that perfection has come unto you. And you can make your choices and make your decisions in His unfailing love.
Picture this morning of with Karen, who's had a really bad headache last night, all through the night. I just keep feeling that there's this sense of breakthrough, and what it looks like is like, it's almost like, okay, this might sound really weird. It's like Karen is like this statue frozen in time, and all of a sudden, in one of the Avengers movies, up in her head, there starts to kind of be these cracks in the statue, and all of a sudden this light just radiates out and just blows apart, I don't know, the stone. And I think that's the impression that I get, is that like there's this rock, and it seems immovable, and it seems solid, and it seems impenetrable, but there's this power. And I feel like it, not to put anything on you, Karen, but I feel like there's this power that is there in authority, and just like this energy that is moving, that wants to move, that is moving. And I don't know. I just pray that you are aware and that you see what the Holy Spirit is doing and feel what the Holy Spirit is doing and trust, which I know you totally do, but and not lacking in trust of yourself, but to know that God is totally can do this, whatever this is. That's it.
Whatever you've been sensing from our God during this time, we bless that in His name. We bless that over the distance of both space and time, into the past and into the future, and in the present. As it goes out and meets your needs and makes you really effective in this world for what you've been called to.
Good morning and welcome to our church service. This week I don't have record of any birthdays, so if we're missing you, please text me, let us know. We'll make up for it next week. But otherwise, that's it for me. So Jim.
Okay, so everything from here on forward is going to be
It's
censored,
gonna be massively censored.
massively censored. The popular uprising has not been effective at this point.
One person is not a popular uprising, Jim.
It
You
is
are not
if it's
popular.
Gene
Oh, okay. Well, Gene hasn't
with
said
his
anything
with
to
his
me.
weaponry. Well, the thing with Gene is he's not going to say anything to you.
Oh, okay. He's just gonna show up at my door with a gun.
You won't even know.
You won't even know.
See, if it was me, I want you to know that it was coming.
I believe
Not
that.
for Gene.
Okay.
He was well trained by Evan. With Gene, you'll sense a fragrance of God.
And that'll
Then
be
you'll
the
be
last
dead.
thing that you ever said.
Then you'll be in heaven.
Oh,
Then you'll
perfect.
be in
Okay,
Jesus'
bring it,
presence.
Gene.
Yes. Ooh, I like that. Katie's ready to go.
Huh?
Take her. Okay, announcements.
Mhm.
I don't know about anyone else, but I am getting tired of hearing the phrase, stay safe.
Mm.
I don't think it's appropriate, especially not anyone who reports to Jesus. Because he doesn't call us to a life of safety. As John Wimber said, faith is spelled R-I-S-K. So we're having a contest to see who can come up with the best COVID-19 phrase as a greeting or as a farewell. When you meet people, or when you're signing your name to an email, or think of all the circumstances that you run into people and they look at you and they say, hey, stay safe. It's like, you know,
So you want something that better represents our life in the kingdom of
yes,
God. Okay.
yes. However, I'll give you a couple examples. These are the ones that I've thought of. Because this really has been bugging me.
Go ahead. I'm
Okay.
curious.
When someone says, how are you doing? My response from now forward is going to be, I'm all masked up with no place to go.
I like that.
Is it?
That's good. That's
It's
good.
sort of a variation on the Bat Out of Hell album and
Okay.
song from Meatloaf.
Okay.
So, next thing. How about fear no evil? You see your cashier at the grocery, and she goes, stay safe. And you just go, fear no evil.
That sounds pretty like
Isn't that cool?
intense.
Well,
They're like, hey, have a great day, and you're like, oh, like
wow. Okay, so,
might be a little intense.
I like it. All right. That's a guy thing,
Oh, okay.
right? Okay, so anyway, we're having a contest. Prize for the best entry is Katie
Oh, no.
will prank you to the level that she did to Courtney. Okay, so
Put it on the website.
colonoscopy. Colonoscopy went well. And none of you knew I was having a colonoscopy because Katie censored it. It's okay, so my condition, which is, I'm told by the doctors it's chronic and it's lifelong, was actually 50% improvement
Hey.
over the last 12 years. I was supposed to get a colonoscopy every 2-3 years, and I showed up a few years late, 9 years late. But I also did that total disregard for their instructions as to taking medication regularly and stuff like that. And God still moved in my favor. Still working on having it go completely, but we're moving in the right direction. Now, I have this other, but I experienced, and this is serious, I experienced some healing on Sunday night. Colonoscopy was set for Monday morning early. I experienced some healing that was miraculous. And what happened was on Sunday afternoon, I was out trimming trees in our backyard, and we have this heavy metal, little giant ladder. And I thought I had locked it into the A-frame position, but I didn't really. And so I wanted to move it, so I grabbed two of the legs and I picked it up like this. And the two legs swung down and slammed this hand. And of course, I wanted to get the trees trimmed because I knew I was going to be out of commission on Monday. So I continued working. But then when I finally went in a couple hours later, I took off my glove and I was just going, well, I really should ice this. But when I put the ice pack on it, which was a fabric soft ice pack, it hurt so much that I couldn't ice it. And so I went through the evening, I tried to apply more ice, but it just didn't work. And then the following morning at 2 o'clock, this was like 8 hours after I had slammed my hand, I got up because of the colonoscopy treatments. And I looked at my hand, and my finger, my middle finger was like swollen, and I couldn't bend it. I mean, it was that swollen, it was painful. I was thinking, wow, this is gonna be a problem. But I was thinking, well, I can't deal with it tomorrow morning because I've got this procedure. So I'll just go back to bed as much as I can and try not to roll over. So I didn't want to go downstairs and put ice on it. Got up the next morning at 6 to go in for the colonoscopy. And by instinct, I reached for my toothbrush. And my finger had total range of motion. It was still bruised and it was still swollen, but I could grab things and it remained that way till today. No, but it was an amazing thing.
Yeah, that's really neat.
It is.
And typically the finger, especially when your fingers are swollen, that you can't do anything with it.
Well, the thing was that earlier this week I had to go out and repair some stairs. And so I was thinking,
How am I gonna do?
yeah, because I couldn't grab anything. But I was stunned. I was sitting there going, this is really weird, but hey,
That's awesome.
yes. Now try to censor that. Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
all right, we'll be hearing from all of you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be hearing from all.
Well,
Hello again. Here we go. We are moving on to lesson 4 in the series Trust in God, the Key to Life. This is where learning how to live the Psalm 23 life, a life without lack, a life without fear, the life that Jesus came and through his life here, through his death, through his resurrection, and his opening up the future age to us and giving us eternal life even now. He has brought us into a way to live, which is different than we were able to before, and that is a Psalm 23 life. And we are going through faith, the need for faith, and another word for that being trust. So trust in God, the key to life. If you remember moving forward, that we have brought up that word as far as being somewhat of a church word, and if we can remember, there are other words that we can use which give it a more natural tense to it. Words such as trust or confidence, belief, to rely upon. And then we've talked about that for the past couple of weeks before Easter, talked about clearing up kind of what the mysteriousness of faith and showing that we all live by faith anyways, all through our lives. But the main question is, once God gives it to us as a gift, is the maturing and the growth and the transformation in that process. So we're going to move on to begin to talk about that now. And we're going to begin by looking at what I would call the three faiths of Job. I will introduce them today, get into the first one, and then we will go through those as we go forward. So Let's start today with that, with the three faiths of Job. So one of the finest examples of transformation in faith that leads to a life without lack is seen in the life of an ancient figure, a man named Job. When we first meet Job in the Bible, he's a fine fellow who is doing quite well in life. In chapter 1 begins by saying, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. And 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Also his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. Those are the first 3 verses in chapter 1. Now, this is a pretty ringing endorsement of a good and great man who was enjoying the blessings and the approval of God. He was, we can be certain, a man of faith. But Job went through a deep transformation in his understanding and relationship to God, which we all need to. And it is important to recognize that as he did this, Job maintained his faith throughout his extremely difficult trials. Yet, in the process, that faith was transformed. This is what I need, and this is what you need. We might say that Job's journey of faith moved from a ritual to a relationship. He began with what we may call the faith of propriety or proper behavior, the faith that trusts in proper behavior. He then moves from that to the faith of desperation, we could call it, and by the end of the book, he finally arrives at full, mature faith. We might call it the faith of sufficiency. We've been talking about living in the sufficiency of God. The faith that says, regardless of what happens, it doesn't matter. I have God, and that's all I need. He is my portion. We can learn much from Job's journey through the maturing of his faith as we move forward on our own. So we're going to take a look at that over the next few weeks. Before looking at each one of these 3 kinds of faith, though, I want us to keep in mind that God does not devalue any of them. And I am not saying that there is something wrong with you if you are not in the 3rd stage yet. One thing we must always keep in mind is that faith is a gift from God, and we need to understand both its nature and how God transforms it. It is true that sometimes the way it is given can be a little rough, which we'll find out, and the path difficult, but nonetheless, faith is a gift from God. And coming to understand this experientially in our experience, as well as theoretically, is a part of the process. We see that in the life of Job, and I'm sure we can all give examples in our own life of that. Now, there's a good reason for this, and if you just take a moment and think about it, if faith is something that I can have, I can possess in me, even though it comes from God, He gives it to me. If faith is something that I can have, and not only have it, but I can exercise it all on my own, it's my faith that I am using. And if faith is as powerful as Jesus says it is, for all the things I can do with that faith, what do you think is likely to happen? Especially if all of a sudden I am able to handle all that. Well, the universe would probably be put out of control pretty quickly. There would be mountains bouncing around, fig trees withering up all over the place, and mulberry trees being uprooted and cast into the sea. And that's only if I'm the one that's utilizing my faith. I don't trust you, so it would be out of control. We need to know and understand that God is more concerned with who you are becoming than He is in what you can accomplish with your faith. Let me repeat that. It's always important to remember that God is more concerned with who you and who I are becoming, more so than what we can accomplish with our faith. That doesn't mean that He isn't concerned with you growing and living by faith. It just means that He's more concerned. There's a bigger thing going on, of which that's part of our life, and that is who I am becoming, who you are becoming. And that is where the root of things, and that's where He goes to, is the root. He desires that you would become the kind of person who can joyfully and easily, naturally receive an abundance of faith and power. He wants that for us. The gift of great faith from God, who knows when, what kind, and how much to give. So this leads us then to where I want to go today and just begin to take a look at this faith of propriety as we go through the story at the beginning of Job. So the Bible continues with the story of Job, who lived in the land of Uz. He was a man of reputation, power, and wealth. And Job trusted God to be good to him if he lived a proper and upright life. He had obviously heard that if you do good things, God would be pleased and would provide for you and protect you. The faith of propriety, or proper behavior. If I do what is good, God will reward that. If I do what is bad, he will punish that. And God did do that. He did bless him. He had a wonderful life. He had lots of children. He had lots of animals. He had a large household. He was very rich. His main problem seems to have been with his family. And out of his family, his sons in particular. Apparently, they did not have much to do beyond throwing parties. Chapter 1 continues by saying this, "And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed days, and would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them." So, if there's 7 sons, and there's 7 days in a week, and each one has an appointed days, it sounded like they were doing a lot of feasting, a lot of partying. The fact that his children spent their time like this was probably pretty worrisome to Job, who was a good man living with that faith of propriety, looking at the behavior not only of himself, but of his kids. He's concerned about the benefits that come from serving God or the punishments that come from going against God. So, in response to his family's activities, we are told that it was when the days of feastings had run their course that Job would send and sanctify them, his children. And he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all for each one of his children. For Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." And then it ends, verse 5 ends by saying, "This Job did regularly." Now, personally, I would do the same thing for my children. I would want them to be covered as much as I could cover them. But along with that, I would probably also get them a job. But as the story goes, one day a company of angels come into the presence of God. Along with them comes Satan. And God asks him where he had been. Satan replies in verse 7, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Now, does that sound familiar? Remember from our last series that we finished on why there is such evil and lack in the world? We talked a little bit about Satan and the power that he had and how he was the prince of the air. And this is what it says in Ephesians 2:2. And how he presides over the thought patterns, the ideas, systems, the social organizations, and the forces of human society. And he's trying to move them in opposition to God one way or another. He just wants them in opposition to God. Well, that is precisely what he's been up to here. So God asks him in verse 8, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" Now, Satan is not dumb. He's just the opposite. He's very crafty, and he's cunning, and he understands human beings. And so when he hears God's glowing description of Job, he goes right to the heart of the matter, questioning the sincerity of Job's faith. So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him and around his household and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." And what he's saying is that you have taken care of him, so of course he loves you. Stop taking care of him, let bad things happen to him, and trust me, he will curse you to your face. Remember, Satan knows human nature. He knows what's inside of us. And he knows the faith of propriety. He knows those that are following the faith of proper behavior. He knows that when our trust is based or founded on the wrong understanding of who God is and how he lives with us, that when God doesn't come through for us in the way that we expect or want him to, then we put the blame on him as being bad. Or we might say he's not there. We don't believe in God if a God's like that. Or we find somebody else to blame and put the blame on them. Or even in some situations, we even blame ourselves. And Satan is counting on this reaction from Job. It reminds me of a story from a long time ago when I had been called by a husband. A man and a wife had gotten married. They were on their second marriages. So they'd been married for a few years, and I knew them. They were a fine couple as far as I knew. I didn't know them really well. But he had called me, and he asked me to come over because his wife was in a really dark place and needed to talk to somebody. And would I come over and talk with her? So I did. I didn't really know what was going on until I got there. I sat down and one evening, and she was crying, and he was being very supportive, and she pointed out that she told me the story, and basically the story was she had two sons from the previous marriage, early 20s, and I think it was 5 years ago that day, the older of the two sons had died in a tragic accident. Terrible thing. And then the following year, on the same exact day, her second son died in a different accident on an anniversary of the death of the first son, of which were all of her children, and they were gone. And so this was the anniversary, and she was distraught. She was broken. And in that brokenness, in that time of being overwhelmed, her thoughts went to, obviously it was not just that day, it had grown over the years, was that was the situation, the circumstances just wasn't right, and there must have been something wrong, and God is good. It must be me. I must have been a bad mother. I was a bad mother, and God is punishing me, and this is how God is punishing me, by taking away my two sons. Now, of course, just like you, I sat there and that does not fit into the picture of who God is at all, but I could not get her to understand that. And the reality was, this was such a person that if 2 weeks later she was sitting in a similar situation with a friend who was telling her that same thing, she would probably say, you're not right for thinking that way. But in the moment, in this time of trying to figure out things, trying to understand things, this is what had happened. And this is where the faith of propriety breaks down. When, going back to what I just said, when our trust is based or founded on the wrong understanding of who God is and how he lives with us, and when something comes, when God doesn't come through for us, or something happens in a way that does not match our understanding, if we are living with that faith, we go to other places rather than hanging on and maintaining in our faith with him. So, going back to this story, now eventually we see that Satan was wrong about Job because his faith was sincere. God was right in bragging about him. He was a man of faith who never cursed God all the way to the end, even though it was suggested that he did by his wife. He was at this point in the story a man of the faith of propriety. Yet while it is genuine, this kind of faith is essentially superstitious and relies heavily on ritual. For it believes that it must get everything just right to reap the benefits, and if I veer from that path, then I will have bad things happen to me. It involves a vision of God that has him up in heaven looking down on us to see if we are going to make any mistakes, and if you do, then you're in real trouble. And as we'll see a little bit later on, a couple of chapters later, this is what Job was actually worried about. Now, a lot of folks have the faith of propriety, And we need to know and understand that it's not all bad. It's still faith. It's just the level of faith where we are. Of course, we would like to have more faith, but it is what it is. God knows that. God understands that. And he works with us to help us grow in that. So we can't look at that as in ourselves or in other people in a judging way, rather than an understanding that this is where we are. And if we are to help ourselves or others, it's to get us in contact with understanding and knowing God more and more. So, like Job rising early every morning to offer burnt offerings on behalf of his sons, the faith of propriety is intent on living life in a way that we might say is religiously. Job got out there and did it just right. And the Lord was pleased with that, and he blessed him for it. Now Satan knew this and decided to challenge the arrangement, which he does, and we will follow that path through the story. But we have to understand that God will still bless this kind of faith because God likes to bless people. He is not that person, that being who is just looking for us to screw up so that he can pull everything out from under us. That's Satan. And one of Satan's tricks, which is what we learned in the last series, is to get him to do these kind of things and then have your attention put that blame on God. God will bless this kind of faith. He will bless any kind of faith. He will bless us even when we don't have faith, because that is who God is. He is good, and he likes to bless people. Now that faith will eventually fail because the faith of propriety will always break down at some point, for it's not based in reality or on a correct understanding and relationship with God. And so when it runs headlong into reality, things will fall apart, and it will not have that deep understanding of who God is to hold on to. And though it is hard on us, it is good that it does happen, because that is part of the transformation process. And unless we come face to face with where we really are as opposed to where we want to be, and where we know that God wants to take us, and where in our heart of hearts we desire to go there, we won't go there. So we're going to pick up that part of the story next week, where this falls apart for Job, and where he moves on to the next level of faith, the faith of desperation. But until then, have a great week. Remember to trust Jesus, do good, and wash your hands, you filthy animals.